Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us, members of the public, our department heads and city officials who are here, and thank you for all of you at home joining in. This is our official kickoff to budget season. Tonight, we will be hearing a brief presentation from the mayors regarding his fiscal year ending 2020 recommended budget. This is an opportunity for the public to provide feedback with regard to that budget. It's now in the hands of council, and we will be going through a series of departmental budget hearings to do further due diligence and make necessary refinements and adjustments in anticipation of adopting a budget by the end of the month. I will go over that schedule later on once we complete, but I know there's information at the entry table as well, and sign-in table. I have a bunch of people who have signed in already, but I will keep the sign-in sheets out, so please feel free to sign up because, again, the purpose of tonight is for you to provide feedback, and we want to hear from you. As far as the agenda, as I mentioned, Mayor Luke Bronin will provide a brief overview of his recommended budget. We will then turn to the public for public comment and then have some closing remarks. So without further ado, want to be respectful of everybody's time to ensure that we can move swiftly and promptly and ensure we give everybody adequate time. So Mayor Luke Bronin, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Council President Thames, members of the City Council, City Treasurer Cloud. It is a pleasure to be back again for our annual presentation. I want to say thank you to all of the members of the public and all of the public servants from the City of Hartford who are here tonight. And before I start, I want to say thank you to Yolita and to our entire budget team who have done a lot of work over the last couple of months and stepped up to prepare this fourth budget since we collectively took office. I'm going to start with just a brief moment of looking back and looking ahead. This is a very different budget proposal and a very different situation than we faced just a few years ago. As everybody knows, we took office a few years ago in the face of an unprecedented fiscal crisis for our city, where the path was not clear. We made some very tough decisions. We worked together to build partnerships, and together we were able to move our city from a place of true crisis to a place of stability. And we did it honestly. You know, we did it transparently. We didn't shy away from talking about the kind of work that needed to be done together. Our goal now is to move from stability to true sustainability and ultimately to strength. But it's important to say, because I think we've made a hallmark of being direct and open about what we face, that our progress is real, but it's fragile. We have to be very careful to protect the progress that we've made. We have to take nothing for granted. We have to continue to look long-term, not just how we're going to get through 1 year, but how we're going to put this city on the path so that we can continuously deliver the services that our residents deserve and build a city with a strong foundation. To that end, this recommended budget stays consistent with some of the key principles that we laid out from the start. Most importantly, number one, it does not raise property taxes. That's a principle we laid out together 4 years ago, that with a city that already has a mill rate, a property tax rate that's far too high, that we could not continue to burden our taxpayers, and in particular those small businesses who really struggle under the full freight burden of 74.29 mills. We could not raise the taxes. This budget does not raise taxes. This budget does not include any new borrowing or debt. This budget makes important investments in public safety and in quality of life, and I will talk in some more detail about those investments. And this budget, as our prior budgets have, protects funding for our libraries, our rec centers, and our schools, and there too we'll go into more detail. I said at the start that we need to look long-term, and we are, right now, for the first time in decades, working with a long-term plan. We have a 5-year fiscal sustainability plan. This budget that I've submitted to council is consistent with that plan. It stays on track with what we projected a year ago. There are always changes, and we have to make sure that we make adjustments, but altogether, it is consistent with our 5-year plan. And again, a part of that 5-year plan is delivering not just 1 year, but year after year, balanced budgets without a tax increase, and making those necessary capital investments without taking on new debt. Because we want to hand our future generations a city that is strong, that is not burdened with the kind of debt obligations that we had to wrestle with over the past few years. Over the long term, our goals have to be bigger than that. Our goals have to be actually to bring the property tax rate down. We want our city to be competitive, to be vibrant, to be strong, to be a place where businesses of all sides, especially those small businesses that employ Hartford residents, can be successful. So over the long term, we want to bring that mill rate back down, and we want to rebuild our fund balance, or our rainy day fund. It's going to be difficult to do that next year or the years ahead, although we do make a little bit of a start at the end of this year, and we expect that we'll put some money into the rainy day fund at the end of this fiscal year. But over the long term, really rebuilding is going to take, again, that continued discipline, that focus on growth. Now, to this point of staying focused on long-term strength, looking at our long-term plan and holding ourselves accountable for staying in line with it, there are a number of things that we need to do. Number one, we have to stay disciplined. We've made some really tough choices together. We asked our labor unions to partner with us in some very, very big ways, and our employees stepped up in big ways that we are very, very grateful for. Those were not small sacrifices, they were big sacrifices, and we're grateful for it. And we have to stay disciplined to make sure that the progress we've made continues. We also have to continue to make sure that we've got that $10 million commitment from our 3 insurance companies, which said together that they would be part of the long-term comprehensive solution for Hartford's fiscal challenges. That means that we've got to stay disciplined, because that's our side of the bargain. We got to maintain that agreement that we reached with the state. It was a historic agreement, which I think appropriately reflects the structural challenges that a city like Hartford, with half of our property tax base non-taxable, faces. But that state agreement under which the state assumes responsibility for making our debt payments on an annual basis needs to be maintained. And finally, and this is really, really important, our long-term strength and our long-term sustainability depends on growth. So we have to deliver a city government that is stable, that's predictable, that's making projections and hitting them, and that is consistently delivering on the promises we make as we work to attract the kind of investment that will allow us in the long run to hit that goal of bringing down the tax rate, because we're getting investment into our community throughout our city. The key date that we're shooting for is coming quick. It's the revaluation of property that happens in 2021. Our tax assessor's office is already preparing for that reval that's going to happen 2 years from now. But the property values in that revaluation, when they look at the values of all property in the city, that's going to show up about 4 years from now in the fiscal year, 3 years from now, in the fiscal 23 budget. And so to maintain the work we've done, we've got to keep growing, and that's why we've prioritized that kind of economic development. Now, I'm going to go into some detail on the recommended budget. First of all, just at the highest level, our budget is a total expenditure budget of $573 million. That represents just a 0.6% increase in spending over last year. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find many towns or cities that are budgeting with as much care and preserving or avoiding bigger increases than that. We have been very careful to do that. Now, if you exclude debt and all capital investments, it's still less than 1% growth. So if you exclude the roughly $11.4 million that we'll be putting into our capital program, it's $561 million versus $557.5 million in FY19. It's really important to say that this budget is balanced. It's balanced without tax increases. It's balanced without one-time revenues or gimmicks. It's balanced without selling off city assets. And it's balanced without kicking obligations down the road and kicking the can. On the revenue side, we saw a small decrease in the general property tax revenue, or we project a small decrease in general property tax revenue. A part of that is because we saw some decline in the grand list for two reasons. One, we had a number of additional residential buildings converted to condominiums, which means that they get taxed at the residential rate. And two, we had a number of tax appeals after the last revaluation of property. There were some big property owners that have challenged, and actually big and small, many challenges, and so it was adjusted down. That's made up, though, for the most part, in other ways. Our licenses and permit revenue has increased, largely because we're seeing more private investment and more economic development activity. We've been receiving higher earnings through interest and dividends due to the market environment. And, of course, this, as I said before, this revenue table reflects the corporate contribution of $10 million, which I think everybody knows, but I want to stress again, that contribution from our corporate community goes directly to our libraries, to our rec centers. It's what allowed us to protect and preserve the funding stream for those critical services in our community that in many cities and many communities that faced budget challenges, that's the first place they went to cut. So we're grateful for that contribution. On the expense side, I talked about the labor agreements that we reached. Those agreements help keep the benefit growth stable. A lot of times, cities and towns today are seeing huge increases in their benefit costs because our employees stepped up to the table and said that they wanted to be part of the solution. We're able to keep that growth in check. There's a payroll increase in the budget, which reflects the investments in quality of life and public safety that I'll talk more about later. I want to stress that this budget assumes that we're passing every single dollar that the state gives us for education to the Board of Education for the purpose of education. The governor's proposed budget would have allowed us to take a portion of education funds and keep it on the city side. We do not take any of that revenue in this budget. And if that comes through in the state budget, we'll pass every dollar through to the Board of Education. This budget also, I'll talk more about capital investment, but this budget dedicates $11.4 million of general fund dollars to our capital investment program. And then I got to highlight that there are additional expenses that we have to bear from utilities. So that's MDC, sewer, its tipping fee with the Mira trash to energy facility, and its fuel cost increases. So those are all areas where we saw some change. So again, areas where because of the work we've done together, we were able to keep costs in check, areas where we've found significant savings over the past few years, and then a couple of areas where costs rise beyond our control that we've just got to meet. Now, I won't go through this chart in depth, but there are a couple of pie charts that we have here just to give you a sense of where your money goes, where taxpayer dollars go, where the money we get from the state goes. First of all, the biggest category is payroll and staffing. That's at $110 million. Benefits and insurance, not including pension, is about $46 million, or 15%, 16% of our budget. And pensions and cash outs, but particularly pensions, is just over 16% at $48 million. Those are the biggest areas of expenditure. We talked about utilities, which is about $25 million. We put over $8 million in the library. With the capital expenditure, the debt service on this $4.8 million in debt service is the annual debt payment on the money that the city borrowed prior to my administration, prior to most council members serving for the construction of the Dunkin' Donuts park. If you break that down a little bit more, just to get you a sense of where our personnel costs go, where our payroll costs go, the vast majority of it goes into public safety. 72% of our payroll spending goes to public safety. That's police, fire, ES&T. Our public works is the next largest category at just under 12 million, or just over 10% of our payroll. And all other payroll makes up about 17%, or $18.5 million of expenditure. And I should say, we'll make this presentation public, so if you don't have a physical copy or if you're watching at home, you will get to see all of these and you can look through these charts. But hopefully they just give a general sense of where the money goes. That big category of spend, benefits and insurance, that's sometimes a complicated one or a confusing one, so I just want to break it down and explain that one a little bit. 35 million of that is health insurance. That's the combination of premiums that we pay as employer, and also because we're self-insured, the costs of running that healthcare system. There's a workers' compensation of about 5 million. Property liability, other types of insurance that we've got to take at another roughly 5 million, and then other benefits at just about 600,000. Now, I'd like to spend a couple minutes just talking about some key priorities in this budget, in particular focusing on some areas where we have chosen, or I'm recommending in this budget that we make some additional investment. We had to make some very, very deep cuts when we came in. Because we were truly at the edge of the cliff. We were like the cartoon character that was over the cliff and our legs were still running and the city hadn't looked down. So we had to make some deep cuts. And we have stayed disciplined and preserved the savings that we've made. But where we can, there are places that we need to try to do more to make sure that we're delivering the services that our residents deserve. And so one of those places is in public safety. From day one, we have said that we are going to rebuild our police force. As many of you know, the city had not hired enough officers for many years. And we had a lot of officers that were hired in the late 1990s who were reaching their retirement age, and so we had a lot of officers retire. We knew from day one, even before day one, that we were going to see our police numbers dip, no matter how fast we worked to recruit. But we set off on the project of doing the recruiting, class after class, year after year. We've recruited over 100 officers, and this budget includes funding for 2 more classes, 60 officers. That could end up being 3 classes of 20, but it budgets 60 officers that we will recruit in this year to continue to get up to a more appropriate staffing level. But we are now, for the first time in a couple of years, at a more stable level, comfortably over 400 as opposed to roughly 375 where we dipped last summer, and we're going to continue that work of rebuilding. This budget also includes funding for tour commander position at our fire department. That is a position that is at the deputy chief level that serves as a safety officer. It is a position that was highlighted in some of the reports that were done after Kevin Bell, firefighter Kevin Bell, died in the line of duty, and this budget includes funding for that tour commander position. Now, there are still details to work out with the union, and this will be part of a bigger package, but this budget includes funding for that position. Also funds an additional crime analyst to support C4. That's our Capital City Command Center. We have seen a remarkable rate of solving crimes, making arrests. While our goal is to drive gun violence to zero, we know that a part of getting there and a part of making our city safer is making sure that anybody who's committing a crime, especially a violent crime, especially a gun crime, understands that the consequences will be predictable and swift. And our police force has done a tremendous job of making those quick arrests. They've been aided in that work by the camera system that we together have used to improve public safety. And the Capital City Command Center is an important way to make sure that that system is effective. So this budget funds an additional crime analyst so that C4 can operate at an even higher level. The next area of key investment is in the quality of life. And this is really important. one of the places where we had to cut awfully deep was in our DPW. And our DPW team has been doing phenomenal work with few resources. They've been working very, very hard. And one of the things that we did a couple of years ago, actually I'll get to that in a second, but one of the things that we've seen over the last year in particular is something that a lot of cities have seen, partly because of climate change. As climate's gotten a little bit warmer and the winters, there haven't had such long cold spells, and also because we've had a lot of construction, we've had an increase in rodent complaints. We take that seriously, we're responding to it, and so we're adding 2 new rodent inspectors in this budget. We're also funding a forestry unit. We made cuts in our forestry unit when we had to, but like a lot of cities around the country and around Connecticut, we're also seeing an increased need to do some preventative work to prevent trees from getting unhealthy or getting dangerous, and we want to make sure that we're able to respond as quickly as possible. So this funds a forestry unit, both staff and equipment. It also funds some additional staff in the DPW Streets Division so that we can make sure that we're delivering on our commitments on Bulkeley, so that we can make sure that we, across the board, are delivering a level of services that our residents deserve. And it makes important investments in traffic control. That's everything from street lights, traffic signs, markings, striping on the roads, so that we can improve pedestrian and vehicular safety. So those are a couple of areas. This presentation is not exhaustive. There's lots of other things in here, but these are a couple of areas where we've prioritized investment in this budget, and that's all of these are beyond what was in prior year budget. With respect to education, you can flip the slide, please. Education, libraries, youth, and recreation. We have worked hard over the past few years to protect those services. This budget, as I said, would pass through 100% of any increase in education funding to the Board of Ed. I also want to note this. It's my commitment, and I hope one that's shared by the City Council, that if the Board of Education returns any surplus at the end of this year, as it sometimes does, that we will put back any of that surplus into the Board of Education. We're not looking to hang on to those dollars. We want to make sure that those dollars are reinvested in education. That's my commitment, and I think and believe it's a shared one. On that point, it's just worth noting, for many years, the city would accept back that surplus from the Board of Education. And also, the city often charged an extensive list of in-kind services that were provided to the Board of Ed, and that money was charged back, against the Board of Ed. We have not been doing that either. This budget maintains the funding for the Hartford Public Library, and as mentioned before, that's in large part thanks to the partnership of the 3 insurance companies that we work with. It continues to fund our youth violence intervention work. And it also funds an expanded summer rec center program as we had last summer. This budget fully funds the pension obligation, or the actuarial determined employer contribution. That's what we have to pay to keep up with the new costs that are added each year for our pension obligation, but also to pay down that unfunded liability, to invest in the future, to make sure that our pension fund is able to pay out what we collectively owe to those employees who've dedicated their careers to Hartford. And I want to flag this also. Not only does it fully fund the ADEC, but with Treasurer Cloud's work with the Pension Commission, it also assumes a lower rate of return. That's a more responsible decision. This doesn't assume that it's getting a higher rate of return that was built into older budgets. It's bringing that rate of return assumption down a little bit to be as responsible as we can. And I want to thank the Treasurer for that. Now, I want to pause before I get into details of the capital improvement program. One of the things that we said together in our 5-year plan that we wanted to do was not take on new debt right now. We've battled through crisis. We moved our city to stability. This is the time to stay focused on that long-term strength. And I'm proud that we haven't borrowed any general obligation debt. And this budget doesn't do it either. Making capital investments without new debt means we've got to be very careful, and we've got to prioritize. It also means we've got to do everything we can to find other sources of funding that can help. So we're aggressive in going after grant funding. We're aggressive in building partnerships. We're aggressive in trying to find some bonding support from the state or elsewhere. Our total anticipated capital spend in this budget is $32 million. That funding comes from our capital reserve, where we've set aside some money to invest in future capital investment. It comes from our general fund. That's what we get in taxes in the year. It comes from state grants, and it comes from some reimbursements. Our priority is on school projects and critical infrastructure. There are a couple of big school projects underway right now. One of them is finishing up soon, Weaver High School. The first time in a long time, we'll have a high quality, beautiful, new, comprehensive high school in our North End. And soon, we will begin the work of renovating Martin Luther King School, that historic school that's really a beautiful, beautiful institution. So those are some of our big priorities, and those school projects take up a lot of room, but they're important to get done. We're also doing work right here in Bulkeley to provide a space for our Board of Education administrative offices so that they can get out of rented space, so we're not paying lease payments year after year. And then beyond that, we fund critical infrastructure projects. I walk through some examples. This isn't an exhaustive list, and as we go through the budget process and have the council hearings, we'll get into a lot of detail on what that capital improvement program looks like. But it prioritizes things like ADA compliance, milling and paving, sidewalk replacement, traffic signal improvements, flood control, bridge repairs, public safety equipment, and also one example that's not noted on here, the renovation of Metzner Center, where we have an early learning center, where we have some improvements that really need to be made to provide our kids with a good learning environment. So that's our focus, education and critical infrastructure. We are also, though, making use of the Hartford Parks Trust Fund to make sure that we can make investments to improve what are some of our city's greatest assets, which are our parks. There's a lot of work that's already begun and a lot of work that's going to be done in the summer ahead, including playscape replacements at a number of parks, Keeney, Goodwin, Pope, Rocky Ridge, Bushnell, park paths at Colt, Sigourney, Elizabeth, renovations to athletic facilities, which include basketball courts, tennis courts, baseball fields, Pope, Goodwin, Highland, Brackett Knoll, and Colt. Improvements to splash pads at a number of parks, and pond dredging at Goodwin Park. Again, not exhaustive, but gives you a sense of some of the work that we're doing using that Hartford Parks Trust Fund to support those much-needed improvements in our parks. And as I said a second ago, we've worked hard to build partnerships and to attract investment, to encourage whether it's the state or private investors or philanthropic sources to work with us so that we really can move this city to a place of true sustainability and strength. And there are a number of projects that are underway where we're not putting city dollars into them or putting very little city dollars in to leverage a lot more money from other sources. This also isn't a complete list. There's a lot of other things, but just to give you an example, you got the renovation of the former Cork Middle School about to begin, the Albany Avenue streetscape, which is well underway, the Maple Avenue streetscape, where we are in design phase, the Parkville Market, the Swift Factory, the South End Boys and Girls Club, which is going to be right behind Burr, pretty close to here, Farmington Avenue streetscape, and Dillon Stadium. So there is activity happening in so many places, and we've worked hard to make sure that we could push that activity forward, push that economic development forward, push towards strength and investment in our communities, while at the same time making sure that we're doing everything we can to protect Hartford taxpayers, to deliver the services that our residents deserve, and to do what we need to do, which is look to the long term and keep our city sound and strong for years and decades and hopefully a generation ahead. So that's the summary. We've done a lot of work together. It's hard to believe that it was just about 3 years and change ago that we were staring into tremendous uncertainty and the budget abyss. But we worked together to do it. We've gone from crisis to stability. We have to protect the progress we've made. We've got to stay focused on the long term. And that's what this budget is about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor, for that overview. So I just want to acknowledge my council colleagues and the treasurer who are joined with me this evening. So starting at my far left is Councilman Larry Deutsch, Minority Leader Wildelise Bermudez, Treasurer Cloud, Mayor who just presented, Glendale Thames, Council President. To my immediate right, Majority Leader Jimmy Sanchez, Councilman Thomas Clark, who's also the co-chair of Operations Management and Budget with me, Assistant Majority Leader John Gale, Councilwoman Molly Rosado, and Councilwoman Arjo Winch. Thank you all for being here. So with that, we are now going to jump right into our public comment because the main purpose of us being here tonight is to hear from you, and we want to make sure we provide enough time to do that. But before we do that, I want to set some ground rules and just set the stage. We do not have our regular clock timer for those of you who are familiar when we have our meetings at council chambers. So in lieu of that, Majority Leader Sanchez is going to use his phone. Everyone will have 2 minutes to speak. When we hear the ringer go ding, 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 I will interject and ask you to wrap up if you haven't wrapped up by that point in time. Please state your name, address, if you're a Hartford resident. If you're not, please state the organization that you represent and your name. So, without further ado, the first on the list, and we have a microphone in the left aisle, is Mr. Mike McGarry, who is right there by the mic, ready to go.
A bit of planning. Anyway, I'd like to comment that I appreciate your efforts. I was on council myself, and I know the time and effort it takes you away from your families and your business, and thank you for your service. But that doesn't mean everything's perfect. By the way, we are facing a great summer. I hope you know that, but we don't hear much about it. We have a great summer coming. We're going to have a whole month of surf. We're going to have the soccer team, the baseball team, things on the river. I think the city should be a little more, put some more effort in marketing those things and telling the whole country that this will be the best summer ever. And come to Hartford and see it and spend some bucks while you're here. But now on the other side, we all admit, I hope, on the council, and the mayor has, that the bulk trash ordinance was a failure. The city looks like a dump, continues to look like a dump. Today on Niles Street, although I've complained about it 100 times, there's all kinds of stuff. And it was terrible to see that house, 43 Niles, go for a month and a half as a dump. A month and a half, despite calls, talking to the mayor, talking to other council people. Finally, it was cleaned up. But it was a month and a half. Every child going to West Middle saw a dump for a month and a half. How many policemen drove by that and didn't say anything? How many council people drove by that and didn't say anything? How about the trash men? Nobody said anything. For a month and a half, the kids looked at a dump. That shouldn't be. You should change that, for sure. So I have 2 suggestions. Number 1, go back to what we used to have that worked. I understand some people from out of the city cheated, but they're going to cheat anyway. Go back to picking up the trash when you do the trash pickup. They used to tell their supervisor where the stuff was, and it got picked up on a regular basis. Now it hangs around for at least a week. People throw stuff out on the weekend. It takes all week for our 1 or 2 trucks to get around to pick it up. Go back to what you did. That worked. Secondly, back when I was on council, we had a wonderful thing called Hartford Proud and Beautiful. It was a group of corporate executives, the guys that took care of the buildings, the hospital, the people who took care of the buildings and grounds, NRZs, Knox, and the city. It worked wonderfully, and it didn't cost the city any money. There still are signs around. You'll see signs around. That sign project that was done, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, it's still there. So you need that kind of involvement on the ground. It's great to give us money, but they have staffs at the hospitals and staffs in the corporate offices that are actually bigger workforce than the city could ever have. Now, back to the marketing. The city should be marketing its residential properties, and it's not. The city should have a campaign to push the idea, this is a great place to live, and all these wonderful places we have. Because, as you may know, the property values have gone down again this year. 4 or 5 years.
Please start to wrap up.
Okay, well, quickly, one last thing. That's a great message, I'll tell you.
You like that, right?
Great message. Go Hartford, yeah.
It was just for you, Mike.
To wrap up, this I-84 project is a disaster. The idea of tearing it down is going to put the city in a hole for 10 years. Look closely at these crazy ideas to tear down that and put us all out of business for 10 years. Because it's not only I-84, not only the viaduct. Remember, they got to go north up through all the car dealerships. Look closely before you sign on to any of these cuckoo projects, because it will be 10 years of torture in this city, and we don't need that now that we're starting to grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Nana Boo? I'm sorry if I am not. Nancy. Oh, okay. All right. Hyacinth Yanni.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, Treasurer. It's a good evening. I am here. I'm Hyacinth Yanni, and I live in the south of Hartford. Member of the Maple Avenue Revitalization Group, member of the Town Committee. First, I want to say thank you, Mayor, for your leadership with our financial situation, and I suppose it works out well with our treasurer. I have to say, you know, when you took over first, I felt really bad because you came into a bad situation. We reached a point where we did not have anything more else to sell out of the city. What were you going to do? But you took that leadership and let us all realize you don't spend what you don't have, okay? And that's the way to go. We have to be on, as I said, a diet. We can no longer just spend and spend. So I want to thank you for your leadership in doing that. Anyway, I'm also here because I want to make sure that we continue to support the police department and the recruitment. That is really great that we continue to do that. Public Works Department, as we know, and I have to say to the Public Works Director, 90% of our call that comes into 311, it's all about public works. And so we need to make sure that we have enough people on the ground to do the job. So that's really important. Our fire department, they need support also. Our senior center, I know we've been on a flat budget, but I'm hoping when we get richer, we can maybe add a little more money to our senior center. And Parks and Rec, we got to support it. We need those kids to have a safe place to go. There's so many things that we need to have. And again, we have to look at making sure that we can bring some economic development in the city to help us move along. Working with the state, with that pilot funding we need to get. And if we get all that, we can work well in this city. So, I just want to let you know, with our school system, we really do need a restructuring of our Hartford public school system. Because to me, and I said it at the last board meeting, we are in crisis. We continue to throw money into Hartford Public School, and it doesn't seem like we're getting our money's worth. Okay, so I want you to look at that seriously. Blight in our neighborhoods, I still want you to focus on getting every one of those homes we have boarded up in the city back on the tax roll. Be more aggressive in getting these blight addressed. So again, I just want to say, thank you for what you're doing, and I am totally in support of your leadership. Thank you.
Anna and Jean Siri. And next on the list is Raquel Calderon.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, our treasurer, and the general public. I just wanted to say thank you for putting together a very comprehensive budget. It goes all across the board, the different departments. I think I'm happy to see that we're starting to fill up some of the positions. I'm very impressed by the work that our Public Works Department has done. Even when they have been short-staffed during the summer, during the winter, they've done a phenomenal job. I'm very supportive of the police department. I think we need to concentrate a little bit more on the south end of Hartford, though, because we're getting a lot of crime coming our way, but they're doing an excellent job overall, as well as the fire department. And my only concern that I have is that we still need to clean up our streets. They're still very filthy. I think Public Works is doing a great job. And every time I call 311, as a matter of fact, I want to say thank you, because they do respond in a very timely manner. But I thought maybe you guys should look at seeing how we might hold some of our business owners responsible for starting to clean up in front of their areas in the front. Maybe that will start sending out a signal to the neighborhood that they need to start also focusing in on their properties. I know, we're doing our best on Fairfield Avenue to maintain our yards and so forth. I'm very concerned also, I don't mind money going into the Board of Education, but I think there's a real serious need to look at the structure and the curriculum. I don't think that our children are getting the full benefit. And it to me defeats the purpose to be putting more money into the education if the kids are not graduating with good grades and going on to college or a technical school, or at least preparing themselves to go out and get a decent job. So that's one thing that I think we really need to start taking very seriously, because we have the whole generations coming right behind us, and it defeats the purpose to have so many beautiful colleges downtown, but yet, a lot of our children here in the city may not even be taking advantage of that because of the lack of proper education that is among their midst. But overall, thank you so much. I think you're all doing a great job. I didn't think I introduced myself. Anna Siri, 197 Fairfield Avenue. I'm a member of the 6th District. And I wanted to say also personally to Jamie Sanchez, our majority leader, Mali Rosado, who is in our district for working with you all and doing an excellent job. Thank you.
Raquel Calderon. And next will be Owen Golden.
Good evening, Mayor Brannan, and good evening, City of Hartford Council members. Needless to say, Hyacinth Yanni and Anna Siri, part of the town committee and also involved in the community, said many things that I wanted to say. And Mayor Brannan, thank you for the job well done. You've been working really hard. Everywhere that I went out of Hartford, and Hartford everywhere, you've been fighting for other towns to come and work with us with Hartford. You have bring up a lot of business. They are very happy. Downtown is looking beautiful. The north end is looking beautiful. I see the improvements in a lot of places. Yes, there are some people who brings up here about the city of Hartford, the way it looks like. Yeah, you know who's doing that? The ones who lives in Hartford. We need to start getting in touch with Housing Authority, with Imagineers, and tell those tenants that they're gonna be, the voucher is gonna go away if they don't clean up their places. They are really, destroying, because they don't, some of them, I'm not talking about everybody. And then also the people that are looking for bottles, and then they throw in all the garbage on the floor, and nothing has been done about it. I think, yes, you should make accountable to the owners of the house and tell them, send them a letter, and I know it's not your fault. You have an employee that you had assigned, and he's supposed to do his job. But you know what? I really thank you for you trying to get, to do better for Hartford. I see how hard you've been working, and I am talking to the community. The community, I know that a lot of people in the third district, 6th district, 5th district, and every time I see them, I tell them, and I'm really happy, and that's why I'm trying to get always spend my money in Hartford, and I see a lot of people coming out of Hartford to the yard goats, and they're trying to blame you for that, and you're not the one who did the yard goats. You continue, and now I am really happy also about the new soccer place that is coming. It's going to bring a lot of people out of Hartford that are excited. They says, when is it going to open, Raquel? About the schools, I need to tell you, it's a failure. I work in the schools and I see what's going on. We need a change, we need a structure. We're spending a lot of money in administration, not enough in the children. And then we're trying to cut down the people like Mr. Colon out of there unjustly. He is one of the best men that the Board of Education had for many years. False allegations.
Can you please start to wrap up?
Okay, so I'm going to wrap up with telling you that I think you're doing a wonderful job, and please continue, and I am going to support you. And I think you should continue your job that you start. Thank you.
Owen Golden, and then Jason Farquharson.
Good evening. Just want to touch on a few points based on the mayor's budget. And specifically, you talked about recruitment of officers, and I just wanted to mention as well, whether or not it is in your budget, but just to make sure, as well as the council, that we're recruiting minorities for our city of Hartford as well in the police force. In addition to that, also you mentioned a lot of funding being spent on the C4 program, and it almost seems as if basically it's a situation where it's a matter of policing people versus building a relationship with the community. So for the council and for the mayor, I think we ought to start focusing a bit more on community building amongst people, not a situation where the police are our enemies or they're sort of dividing the community as well as the police officers. We want to work with law enforcement as well as individuals that live in our city. Another thing I'd like to mention is the building of our technical school systems, as well as getting our young people involved in the trades and helping them to build our city as well too, because not everyone's going to own $1 million home, but these people can learn a trade, whether it's an electrician, a plumber, an HVAC worker, and they can also be available to help build homes and help with people that live in the city and bring back infrastructure and monies to our capital city. So those are just a couple things I want to touch on, as well as public works. Some of the funding, we need to get some more people out here in public works to help us with these rodent situations as well as the potholes in our city. I drive a very expensive car. Now, if I got to drive one more time and get another bubble in one of my tires, it's gonna, it's not gonna sit well. So we need to focus on some of these things to help our city. Thanks.
Jason Farquharson, and then Ann Gashadian.
Good evening. My name is Jason Farquharson. First proud graduate of Weaver High School, class of 1999, Hartford resident, member of the North Hartford Education Task Force, and project lead and creator of Hartford Paint the City. Good evening, and thank you all for this presentation. My question and my focus is on the capital improvement funds. I noticed it was $32 million. Hopefully, there'll be another meeting that showcased the dollar amounts allocated towards Weaver High School and MLK out of that $32 million. The community has been talking about making sure that Weaver High School, from top to bottom, has a lot of community input. We haven't had a chance to really been a part of the table. There's been a lot of moving parts. A lot of council members changed, the mayor changed, superintendent changed, but the community has been consistent on what their needs are for the school. And after that walkthrough, we realized there's a lot of things missing from our recommendations. And we felt like there wasn't a partnership between HBS and what the community needs. So we hopefully hope that there's some funding in that budget that showcased that the field house is something that Doc Hurley will be proud of. So that we can use that field house to gain some additional equity, make sure the field itself is up to snuff so that the scoreboard can be tied into the JMA program so that students can broadcast activities, sports events, community events live on the radio and on television as well. Also, regarding the Hartford School Building Committee, I feel like we need to change the way that format is set up. I believe that those meetings that are held once a month at 12 noon at the library is not conducive to the community. Hopefully, if it's held later in the afternoon, we can get some more community input. And I believe the board structure should have more than one resident on there for oversight and transparency. I would like to offer myself as a person who would like to sit on that board as an additional resident of Hartford, because I believe that there's some information regarding Hartford Public Schools regarding all the dollar amounts that are spent regarding every school project that there's no connectivity between the Hartford School Building Committee and HBS. They don't speak to each other, and when you ask individuals from each one of those entities, it's really hard to get a definite answer regarding what those construction dollars go to. So again, hopefully we can change the way that the Hartford School Building Committee format is constructed so they can have an additional residency on that board so we can have some more oversight, and that we make sure that that the City Council, the Hartford Board of Education, and the Hartford School Building Committee, they all talk together in regards to the dollar amounts being allocated for all the schools across the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann Gostamian and Jane Cromwell.
Sorry. Ann Gostigian, 80 Weathersfield Avenue, Hartford, Connecticut. There are some things that are very good in this budget, and I agree with some of the structure. There are a few things I do want to mention. As far as the extended summer hours at the rec centers, I have it on very good authority from members of the Park and Recreation Advisory Commission that was not a very good program last summer. It was kind of herky-jerky. There was really no structure or planned activities for the young people that were there. There was actually no control of where they were when they were there. They would come in and they'd eat and then they'd go hang around outside, and from reports were doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing. There are also children who are way too young to be there with kids who are a lot older. When you've got 10 and 11-year-olds hanging around with 16 and 17-year-olds, it doesn't work. Also, as far as transportation goes, I understand that kids were getting rides home from people they didn't know. Now, if I were a mother of a young child in Hartford schools who was attending that, I would want a lot more oversight. And I think before you allocate the money, you need input from PRAC. You need to hear the reports that I heard. Question, you don't have to answer it, Mayor, but I didn't see anything in the budget about how much we allocate for all of the ongoing lawsuits against the city. How much are we paying to outside law firms for some of them that have dragged on for well over a few years? I think the public has a right to know how much we're spending on that. Mike, my friend Mike McGarry. Oh, you're still here, Mike. You said you were leaving. Mike talked about kids walking to West Middle School and seeing the bulky waste, and he's right, absolutely, it's disgusting. I live on Weathersfield Avenue. Not only do we have bulky waste that probably exceeds it in anywhere else in the city on Weathersfield Avenue and its side streets, but we have 3 public schools within probably about a half mile on Weathersfield Avenue. And when our kids walk to school, they get to see prostitutes work in the street as early as 7 and 7:30 in the morning. Now, if I had a choice, I guess I'd rather have my kids see some old mattresses than to see prostitutes out there and cars pulling over and doing U-turns until they find the one they're looking for. This is what our young children see on their way to Burr, to Bulkeley, and to Batanza School.
Can you please
I will
start to wrap up?
I will wrap this up in a second, please, Glenn. Weathersfield Avenue is a mess. You talk about public safety, there are no traffic laws on Weathersfield Avenue. There is no enforcement of traffic laws on Weathersfield Avenue. We have drag racing 24/7. We have cars passing on the right. We have going through a red light is common. It's more common than stopping at a red light. It's a problem. That part of the city, that is, you talk about the South End, you talk about Maple Avenue and Fairfield Avenue, which have their problems. But when you come down to Weathersfield and Franklin Avenue, you're going to see problems like you have never seen before. Mayor, I'd like to see you walking around down there on Weathersfield Ave. You know, going to MARG meetings is good. Going over to Hartford's Pizza is nice. But come
Okay,
on
ma'am,
down
we're gonna have
and
to
hang
wrap
out
up.
with us. Thank you.
Jane?
I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong list.
Oh, you were signing in, right? Callie Moquette? Andrea Hartman? No, okay. We're moving swiftly. Bridget? HPA, oh, okay, HPA, wrong list? Okay. I'm having a hard time with this one, but 97 Love Lane, I'm not gonna butcher the name because I can't really read it, sorry. Okay. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is O'Neill Anderson. I want everybody to see this face. I work for Public Works for City of Hartford. All the residents in Hartford, I want you guys to know this. We used to have 13 garbage trucks. Now we have 7. All the Hartford residents, we have 7 garbage trucks. I'm a driver. I pull 18 to 20 tons of garbage daily. Sometimes we have to use the bulk driver to do trash. Guys getting hurt more often. Our insurance sucks. We used to have Anthem, Blue Cross, and Blue Shield. I used to pay $68 weekly. I'm paying $150 to $200 weekly. I'm paying $800 a month for insurance because I didn't stay with I didn't take Cigna. That did high deductible. I still stick with that PPO. But my colleagues, they got that Cigna, high deductible, and they feeling it. Guys' knee are shot, walking behind them garbage truck. I used to be back there. I try my best to get away from it. So all the City of Hartford residents, I want you guys to know this. We're understaffed, we overwork. We need help, and we're underpaid. I'm gonna say this, Mr. Mayor, I want you to hear this. I'm bringing $300 home a week. I'm not gonna hold my head down and talk. I want everybody to see my face. Working for the city of Hartford. I decided this is my time to speak up. I'm not going to close my mouth. All these bulky ways, you see out there? The guys who are supposed to drive that bulky truck, they have to use them in a packer because guys is out on knee surgery. We hiring new guys, they go in streets. Streets, I know they're very important over there. Them guys, they work on the street, but sanitation, I thought when I just came here, was the first, trash was the first priority, but no more. Management cheat us. You wanna hear that? Real bad. You know when I get winter gloves? In the spring. Thank you. I'm gonna be the vice for the viceless. I'm not lying. I got my pay stub in my pocket, so anybody wanna see it? Public Works. We get a squeeze. When I just started 8 years ago, I was making more than what I'm making now. Cost of living, I own a house in the city of Hartford. My mortgage is $1,300. I have to pick up scrap metal. Got 2 kids and a wife. I don't get help from the state. When I fight for a position, I fight for overtime, not to go sit in a truck and look pretty. I want to feed my family.
Okay, I'm gonna have to ask you to wrap it up. Thank you for your service and thank you for coming out. It's important that we hear this. Charmaine Anderson. I'm assuming that was a relative of yours, Anil. Joyce Bosco. Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joyce Bosco, and I live at 712 Broadview Terrace in Hartford. First of all, I want to thank all of you for the work that you do. I know it's not easy work, and I know you put a lot of time and energy into it. There's 2 things that, when I go around to talk to people, what I don't hear is a plan for homeowners to stay in Hartford and to get more homeowners in Hartford. Because the basis of a strong community are strong families and homeownership. That has a lot to do with the stabilization of neighborhoods. There's been wonderful development downtown. It's been phenomenal. But I don't see that same thing happening in our neighborhoods. And the other thing I want to speak about is there's a lot of money going into police and quality of life. And I support it 100%. But I would like you to think about some other things around community building as a way of controlling violence, because the cohesiveness in neighborhoods have been destroyed. Partially that's through school choice, which is a wonderful thing. However, one of the collateral damages of that is that the cohesiveness in neighborhoods have been really altered. So when you're thinking about how to improve the quality of life in Hartford, please think about events that bring not just people to the downtown, not just build businesses, but also help homeowners. There's so many homeowners that want to maintain their property, they can't afford to. So what is the plan for that? So that people can stay in their homes. Yes, we can find them. We can do a lot of things through blight. But I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking about people who really want to remain in Hartford. They want to live here, but they can't really afford to. So if there are plans to help homeowners like access some of the services they need for their houses in some kind of way of creating a joint contract so that people can get these services at a very low price to maintain their properties, that would be so helpful. Because what's happening is there's a lot of people who aren't quite eligible for some of the programs that are out there for really low-income people. But they also can't afford to do what they need to do for their houses. So I think, and a lot of the home ownership programs have kind of dried up. So we're not getting new homeowners with families in neighborhoods. The fact that we no longer have any real neighborhood schools is a problem because people actually want to walk their kids to school. They want to see the other families that live in their neighborhood. So now, as someone who's been involved in community organizing for many, many years, like, where do you go to get to the people? There is none of that cohesiveness. So think about events that you could have in neighborhoods as that could draw people together and plan together. The NRZs do try to do their part, but many of them are non-funded in any way. So how do we better support these organizations that are in neighborhoods that are trying to create this cohesiveness that can affect the quality of life, can affect crime, can affect people being a support system to each other? How do we try to support that more in this budget? So those are some of the questions that I have.
Thank you.
You very much.
Thank you. Victor Luna. Victor Luna. Okay. Barish Adams. Okay. Apologies.
Good evening. My name is Barisheth Adams. I'm representing St. Francis Hospital. I'm on the trauma team. I do general surgery and trauma. I've been there for about 7 years. Two things that I just wanted to bring to your attention. We are slowly bringing AI to the hospital. We're doing robotic surgery, and we're embracing 3D printing. And I think as the 5G network is coming to Connecticut, we have to be able to get Hartford, Connecticut residents ready for that so they can be able to get jobs. So when we talk about technical schools so they can be plumbers, electricians, I think we have to put how are we going to embrace artificial intelligence to get these kids ready so they can be able to code, do development, so that way they can get jobs and that we're not allocating it from people from other states. That's number one. Number two, I think we need to work better with the police department because I've patched a lot of people up to send them out and they've come back dead. We've had a couple patients where they've been shot multiple times, we fixed them, they come back as a full trauma, I'm cutting their pants off, bullets are falling out of their pockets, and when they're there, from what I understand, they're arrested, but then there's nobody there to arrest them once they're discharged. And then we've had a couple people come back doing the same thing, either shooting people or retaliating, and they come back dead. So I don't know who's gonna be the person when we do have a person, a GSW that's coming in or stabbing or assault, who's gonna be the police officer that I can talk to, or what's the plan of discharge? Is this person gonna be arrested? Is he gonna be detained? Because sometimes when they're on the floors, they may have an officer there and then they leave and they don't really talk to us about what the plan of discharge is. And we do get a couple of them that go back and do, you know, the stuff that they shouldn't be doing that's gonna hurt people. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other, my list is coming to an end, or has ended. So is there any other people who would like to comment that didn't get a chance to sign up? Now is your opportunity. Going once, going twice. Okay, then that concludes our public comment section for this evening. I just would like to close by saying thank you to Public Access for making sure that all of our technical needs were handled. So we are able to live stream this as well for residents who were not able to make it, and it will be recorded. And also to our council staff for ensuring that we were all prepared to welcome you all here tonight. Next up, we will be having our departmental budget hearings. The first one is next Wednesday, May 1st, starting at 5 p.m. at City Hall Council Chambers at 550 Main Street. Hopefully you all are available to join us and observe and listen in. But to the extent that you have additional commentary, questions you would like us to ask our various departments as they come before us, please feel free to reach out to any one of us on council. All of our emails and contact informations are on our website at www.hartford.gov. You're able to find our bio and see our picture and click on our email address. So please use that as a function as we go through this process over the next week, couple of weeks rather. But again, thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you all for listening in at home. And we look forward to continuing to engage you through this process in anticipation of adopting a budget by the end of the month. So thank you and have a great night.
Hey, Carl. How's everything?
About the hours.
It was gonna go to 8.
I actually bought my house here so I could walk my kids to school.